changed so much, Thorfinn. In fact, I thought you were someone else when I first saw you. That anger in your eyes is gone. I'm glad.
Because I have no enemies.
Violence, a universal concept that has existed between humanity for more than 12,000 years. When you pick up a history book or watch a history movie or a show, you can see how much of human history is made up from violence. You see things such as human warfare, you see things such as genocide, you see countries invading each other all the time. It's even happening in the modern day. We also see things such as crime happening. We see people getting robbed, people being shot. We see violence in our everyday lives, basically. I'm pretty sure all of us have a desire for world peace when we look on the news and we see all of the violence that's been happening in the city. Everybody has a desire for world peace. But let's talk about Vinland Saga, and let's talk about Thorfinn's journey. Throughout Vinland Saga, we see so much violence take place. We see Thorfinn take place in so many countless violent acts, all for the sake of revenge. We see all of these violent acts take place because of the ideology of a warrior. Ideology of a warrior mainly correlates to the Viking ideology. As you can see throughout Vinland Saga, we see the Viking warriors talk highly about a place called Valhalla, and Valhalla is a place where a warrior goes if he dies in battle. But also on the show, we can see that Valhalla doesn't exist. All of this violence and raiding villages and plundering for wealth is pretty much senseless. However, we also see the influence of being a warrior, the influence of warriors being told of their stories from the battlefield. We mainly see this warrior influence in the beginning of Vinland Saga when we see Thorfinn and Thor's talk about you don't have any enemies, where they talk about the dagger and Thorfinn has a desire to fight. We also see it from the kids in the village being excited to go to war. That's how much the Viking influence has in this period. Even before Thorfinn went on his I have no enemies ideology, we could see that he hated war from the beginning. Despite hating war, he still took place in countless violent acts, all for the sake of revenge, and got plenty of people killed. And he even killed fathers, mothers, sons, husbands, anything you could think of. If you think about it, can a person be truly redeemed for all of the bad they have done with just a few good deeds? All of the bad you have done in the past, all the violence you have committed, all the hatred you have caused, can you really be redeemed from that? And this is where we go into the path of forgiveness, atonement, and redemption.
生きろと言える世界が欲しい。死ぬ以外救いを持たない人たちに胸を張って語れる俺たちの生きる世界に。それだけをみんな求めていたのに。
Thorfinn is one of the greatest redemption stories that we have ever seen, but there is another. But let's talk about the place known as Vinland, a land of peace. Is it possible to have a world full of peace? A world where violence doesn't exist, a world where human suffering doesn't exist, a world where disease doesn't exist, a world where everybody can just love each other. That's the one desire we all have, world peace, for everybody to love each other. You see, humanity is divided by a great amount of things. These things include race, religion, politics. Any two things with opposing sides will forever divide humanity. And is it possible to truly end all of that? Is it truly possible to end conflict? Humanity fails to understand that we are all the same. Despite our differences, everybody is human at the end of the day. We all bleed. And it doesn't matter if you are Christian, atheist, we are all pretty much the same at the end of the day. If humanity could realize this, then we could truly come together and make something big happen. However, this is only a dream that everybody has, which will probably most likely never be possible one day. Going back into Thorfinn's mindset and goal, is it truly possible to create a land where no weapons lie? Thorfinn's goal is essentially to create a place where slavery, war, and violence doesn't exist. The one thing I like about Thorfinn's ideology is he doesn't fail to acknowledge that you can't end all violence on Earth. It's pretty much impossible. You can't end slavery. And this is pretty much the opposite of what Canute is trying to do to achieve paradise on Earth. Canute wants to save the Vikings because they are the prime example of the violence that happens on Earth. However, I do think Thorfinn's goal is more realistic than Canute's goal for paradise. However, both idealisms can have flaws. For example, Vinland, a place where no weapons lie. If you have no weapons in Vinland, violence still exists on Earth. People can come and raid and plunder the villages that you have built. So I do think that weapons are definitely necessary. You know, violence is a bad thing, but it can be necessary sometimes. Self-defense, for example. If you think about it, violence is an instinct. Violence is something that we all have experienced. It's something that everything understands. All life understands violence. It's something that is used in everyday life. It's just a concept that is here on Earth. Let's look at animals and insects, for example. Ants. Ants have had wars for thousands of years, even longer. Ants have been around since the Jurassic period, and ants have been going to war for millions and millions upon millions of years. Ants are very interesting creatures because they are just like humans. We wage war on each other for resources and wealth. We all come together to accomplish big things, and we all provide for our family. The most important factor of all of that is we are just following our instincts. Human instinct generally gives us the desire to rule over others. Sometimes we don't like the way a person thinks or the way they behave. War starts because of instinct. What I mean by following our instinct is that you know how animals and insects have to fight to survive. It's either kill or be killed. This is pretty much the same scenario with humanity. Look at all the wars we have had throughout history, and even present day there is still plenty of wars going on. I mean, we see it on the news every day. All of these wars pretty much have the same factor to why they start. Resources, territory, and wealth. We even see this in Vinland Saga as we see Canute wage war against other countries for territory and wealth. And you might think that wars can potentially end someday, but that is not the case. For example, let's look at World War I. World War I was the war known to end all wars. And what happened later? Another war broke out, and that is known as World War II. So as long as humanity exists, there probably won't ever be an end to a war. 100 years from now, there will probably be some futuristic war that happens, or humanity could ultimately come to a closing and end itself. World War III will happen, and World War III could potentially happen at some point. Like, it's quite possible that it will happen potentially in our lifetimes because tensions are pretty high in the world right now, but this will be a catastrophic event that will end all of humanity. And the ultimate reason why that will happen is because of the human emotion, hate, and the human instinct, violence. However, let's get back into the topic of Vinland Saga. What does it mean to have no enemies? Is it truly possible to have no enemies? To walk the earth without hate for anyone? To walk the earth without dislike for people that do horrible things?
I have no grudges against you. So why? Why do we have to fight? It's absurd. The only people that should be fighting are Kettle and King Canute. The leaders should be playing Nefertofel, not us. We should
One
be the
who's a
one.
great warrior doesn't need a sword. What does it mean? What is your interpretation of what a true warrior is? Perhaps protecting people from violent acts? Perhaps not participating in violent acts? A true warrior doesn't have to indulge in violence to be a great warrior. Most warriors believe that engaging in violent acts and participating in warfare all for the sake of Valhalla will make them an amazing warrior. It's an ideology that warriors grew up admiring, that one day they can go out on the battlefield and be a warrior and die one day and end up in Valhalla. Warriors have no idea of the horrors they cause. Take Torquil, for example. He's never known war. Who could admire warriors if they had seen them in action? They don't have any idea the horrors that they cause. They're just beasts. Beasts dressed in sheepskin. An amazing quote from Einar, because we see this in real life too, such as war crimes of soldiers doing horrific acts of killing innocent civilians in a war zone, pretty much tons of war crimes. But going back to a true warrior needs no sword. What is the real message behind that statement? Now, that is a statement I think everybody has a different interpretation of. In my opinion, I think a true warrior is a warrior that fights to make peace, not violence. Ending the cycle of violence. This is the cycle of violence that we see in other animes such as Attack on Titan and Naruto. The cycle of hatred. For example, in Attack on Titan, Aaron's mother is killed. He instantly has a desire for revenge, a hatred for the Titans. And this hatred prolongs until the Marleyans. He also has a hatred for Marley. And then he makes the entire world his enemy. Thorfinn and Aaron are pretty much the exact opposites of each other. Thorfinn has no enemies. Aaron made everybody his enemy. Another example is Pain's speech about the cycle of hatred and how the 5 great nations destroyed his village through war. Just listen to this.
You asked me why I'm doing all this. But even if I told you why, I doubt very strongly that the knowledge would change anything at all. What I want is to create peace and bring about justice. Oh, I see. That is noble of you. That would be justice. However, what about my family? My friends? My village? They suffered the same fate as this village at the hands of you Hidden Leaf Ninja. How is it fair to let only you people preach about peace and justice? Once, the Land of Fire and the Hidden Leaf had grown too big. To protect their national interests, they forced feudal clans to wage war against each other, and profited from it. Otherwise, the people of the villages would have starved. As it happened, our little nation and its villages became the battlefield where the great nations waged their war. Each time they did, our nation was ravaged and laid to waste. After many such battles, the great nation stabilized, but our smaller nation suffered, and it barely recovered. You and I are both seeking the very same.
What about my family? My friends? My village? As you can see, Thorfinn is facing the same cycle of hatred that Naruto faced. Pain states that the Leaf village is no different from the other village. They still cause destruction and chaos upon the ninja world. That is what ultimately caused the cycle of hatred. As you can see, Naruto had nothing to say after that because it's true. The cycle of hatred will always continue so as long as we exist. The cycle of hatred is what makes the world a living hell. Most of us and some of us are unaware of all the violence that is happening on Earth. Gang warfares, crime, war. Wars that happen and tear innocent families and innocent people apart, all for the greed of government officials. Even though a lot of people didn't like season 2 of Vinland Saga because it was boring, they don't really get the message that it was trying to portray. And the message it was trying to portray was ending the cycle of hatred. And it's pretty much okay if you thought the farmland arc was boring, because some people actually enjoy just action, adventure, you know, fighting animes, and that is totally okay. And then they have people who enjoy well-written animes. Everybody has a taste. But going back into the subject of Thorfinn's atonement and redemption, we see that forgiveness is what breaks the cycle of hatred. We see Thorfinn apologize to his dead victims, and we see that he finally decides to atone for his past sins. We could see that Thorfinn didn't have a purpose in life when season 2 first started. His only purpose in life was killing Askeladd. His whole sole purpose was getting revenge. And this is Askeladd's philosophy of everybody is a slave to something. As we can see, Thorfinn was a slave to his revenge, and when his revenge left, he had nothing. Another thing is Canute. Canute is a slave to the crown. If you think about it in life, you are a slave to something. Whether that be pretty much anything, everybody is a slave to something. Thorfinn's true battle is atonement. Vinland Saga has a lot of Christian ideals, the things that Jesus taught us in the Bible. Jesus preached unconditional love and forgiveness that every human should have. Instead of holding hate in your heart, you should always forgive someone, because you will be a better person at the end of the day. Hate is a concept that flows through the human heart. You might have had someone you hate now or someone you hated in the past. The question is, what was it for? Did this person wrong you? Or was it a traumatic event? You know, sometimes it's easier to give in to hate than it is to give in to love. Hate flows through every human naturally. We've all hated in the past, and we all loved in the past. If you have hate to someone in your heart, you should pretty much just let it go. Regardless of what they did, the true thing is moving on. And this is the things that the Bible teaches us, the things that Jesus preached. Forgiveness is a true concept. It might be harder to give into forgiveness than to give into hate. However, deep down in your heart, I know that you want to be a better person. And forgiveness is one of the first steps to that. It might be a little difficult. You might not want to do it at all, but you should at least try. If humanity was to learn that principle, the world would be so much a better place. That is perhaps how we can truly end the cycle of hatred. Though it might not be possible, we can at least imagine it. If you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate it, since I'm just starting on YouTube and not a lot of people watch my videos. But if this got to you, thank you very much. I really appreciate you for sticking around this long. This also goes into the trend of not having any enemies. We've all seen it on TikTok, YouTube, of the I have no enemies trend. This has pretty much worked. A lot of people adapted a new philosophy of being better people and having no enemies and having no hate in their heart. It might sound corny to some people, but it's actually a big philosophy that a lot of young people have taken on from Vinland Saga. You know, Vinland Saga is really influential, and it has a lot of beautiful themes in it, such as love is discrimination, abstaining from violence, a lot of things that we can learn from the show and apply to the real world. You know, sometimes you might not need that much action and violence and stuff in anime shows or any TV show to really grab your interest. Sometimes the story alone can grab your interest in the ideas behind that story, the themes that go into that story. However, another thing I would like to discuss is the ending of Attack on Titan, because it's actually pretty similar. The ending of Attack on Titan was essentially trying to portray how humanity repeats itself, how humanity will remain violent for the rest of their existence. We see Eren, despite his best effort to end all of this, humanity still continues. The cycle repeats. Violence still exists. Wars still exist. The rumbling or no rumbling wouldn't have mattered because despite Titans being gone, humans will always find new reasons to fight, and that is the cycle of violence. The Attack on Titan ending shows that there can possibly never be any peace between humans. For as long as we exist, we will always have disagreements, be divided by religion, race. Like it said in the end, history repeats itself. Despite Eren and Armin's best efforts to end the cycle of violence, it didn't end. This is where I ask you, the viewer, do you truly think the cycle of hatred and the cycle of violence can truly end? Do you think that humanity can maybe one day realize that religion, race, and many things divide us, and we could finally come together and make a new change for the world? Learn from this video and become true warriors.